Today we're going to talk about why you got back into sports cars in 2023, or maybe 2020, 2021, or 2022. Today's going to be a fun episode. We need some feel-goodness. I feel like lately, with just everything going on, we just need a little bit of a feel-good video. I do these about once a month, and we're going to touch on some of the magic, I think, that brings us all into this space and keeps us here. Before I dive in, huge shout out to today's video sponsor, COMC.com, your home for buying, selling, and flipping all the hottest trading cards. Their consignment marketplace now home to over 32 million cards from baseball's biggest stars like Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, and Mookie Betts to Marvel favorites like Spider-Man, Thor, and Captain America. COMC has something for every type of collector, so make sure to visit my link below in the video description, as well as in the pinned comments to check out COMC. All right, friends, life is busy. I think we know that. And man, if you're like me, I'm 42 years old, you just don't maybe recognize a lot of what the world is today.
Every day, baby! Do this every day!
Feels like it's changing, and maybe it's, we're just all getting older. I know my YouTube analytics shows me that the majority of my audience is between 35 and 55, so we're all kind of in a similar bucket here of life. Maybe it's the middle age crisis, the midlife crisis that I've joked about before. Whatever it might be, it just feels like when we were growing up, times have absolutely changed. Some for the better. If you look at technology, I wouldn't be here talking to you if there wasn't advancements in technology. I remember, talking on the phone on a cord phone.
They got me a computer, a video camera, a compact disc player. But the problem is, hardly any of this stuff can really help me with my schoolwork.
There is something you could have which would help you a lot. Do you know what that is?
No, but I'm afraid you're going to tell me.
Yes. It's the new Encyclopedia Britannica.
Encyclopedia Britannica? Now you tell me. I've got a report due tomorrow.
On what?
On the exploration of space.
It was a big deal to have a cordless phone, and now, of course, we're all just on our cell phones. We don't even barely have computers, desktops anymore. We just have cell phones, and that pretty much runs our life. And so I think for a lot of people, a lot of my viewership, the world feels different, and we just want to connect back with the stuff that made us happy back in our childhood days. There were so many, I think, just innocent times when we think about going back pre-internet. When I was a kid, it was really just riding bikes with your buddies. It was playing video games. It was trading cards. That's really what life was. I used to go fishing with my dad. It was a much more simple time, it feels like, than what we have today. And on top of the fact that we had a lot less responsibilities back then, it also just so happened to be the 80s and 90s, the most prolific 20 years in pop culture history.
One shall stand, one shall fall.
Whether we're talking about music, whether we're talking about movies, TV shows, the 80s and 90s are so dominant. And I know that each generation kind of has their own viewpoint on this. But man, when I look back at previous generations and I look back to kind of that next generation, I'm just not seeing a whole lot that rivals the 80s and the 90s. In fact, even my own kids have said, Dad, I really wish that I could have grown up when you grew up back in the 80s and the 90s. It's just, and maybe it's just a timing thing. Maybe it's just now everyone's looking fondly back at those decades, but just the amount of stuff that came out. And look no further than what Hollywood and music are doing. How many new songs are sampling older songs? And I know in the 80s, 90s, they were sampling some of the older stuff, but not even in the same ballpark as what they do now. It's always like, oh, that was an 80s song? Oh, that was a 90s song? We're sampling it. Everybody's sampling all the 80s and 90s music. For movies, we've got 95-year-old Harrison Ford is out here, still playing Indiana Jones. I didn't see the last one. I think he finally, spoiler alert, I think he finally passed on. Who knows? He'll probably come back as a Force ghost or something, like a Star Wars thing. Who knows, honestly. But look at how they've just kept everything alive. There's been 18 different Ghostbuster remakes, and even Bill Murray and the gang were in the last one. It was actually kind of sad to see the last one. I love that movie. But man, just seeing how everybody aged, it's just like, man. And then, of course, one of them has passed away. So it's just sad, to watch it, because those are just such classics. Look at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They've redone that 400 times. There's animated versions. I can't keep track of all of it. Masters of the Universe.
By the power of Grayskull.
Kevin Smith managed to screw that up. the latest Masters of the Universe. And then you've got Star Wars, which continues on. Some of the new Star Wars stuff, very good. I wouldn't say all of it, but just the fact that they've been able to put out so much content and it actually be fairly popular and stay in kind of that mainstream popularity. They've actually done a pretty good job, although I think they're pushing out a little bit too much. There's really not enough mystery there. I think they need to slow down a little bit, but the list goes on and on. You know, we'll probably see another Gremlins. We'll probably see another Goonies. I think Beetlejuice 2 is coming out here pretty soon. It's endless. You know, Hollywood studios, they're not playing around. They don't want new ideas. They're going back to the old tried and true stuff that works, and we eat it up. Our age group eats it all up because it is simply the best. Going back to the 80s, it was the rise. It's funny, vintage video games going back to the 80s with Atari and with Nintendo, obviously.
What's it like to play the Nintendo Entertainment System?
And then Super Nintendo on the back of it, Sega Genesis on the back. I know kind of Atari kind of fumbled a little bit with the ET game, but hell, you've got, I don't know if people know this, but there's an Atari ET game that they had to push out, you know, before Christmas going back into the 80s, and it was awful. It was an awful game, and they ended up burying like 1 million of these games out in the desert or something somewhere out west. There's a whole documentary on it, and they've actually sold graded copies of dug up copies of this ET game. I've seen it for hundreds of dollars. It was either on Heritage or one of these auction houses. That just shows you the absolute love and the amount of money that some of the people are spending on some of these items at auction. These are pop culture items, and I don't necessarily think it's just speculation money and just investing money. I just think it's for the love of the game too. I think people just love that stuff. And then of course the sports legends going back to Michael Jordan, you know, Barry Bonds I picked up, and Barry Bonds rookie card going back a few months, because these are just iconic cards, and not even talking about value wise, but just, you know, the memories that come from seeing these in card shops and just kind of the aura around it. It's all tied, you know, to these memories that we had just going back to a much simpler time. And people are looking for that, man, because the world, like I said, the world's in a weird spot. And I know people kind of throw that around, but it just does feel different now. It just feels like, especially in the United States, it's just kind of a weird time where, you know, we don't know what's up, we don't know what's down, whether we're talking about economically, socially. It's a weird time, honestly. And so what's not weird and stuff that we can kind of dive back into and enjoy are all the things that I just mentioned. You know, and so that is the glory that comes with this hobby. I know a lot of people just collect sports cards, but I also know there's a lot of viewers that buy into all sorts of different things. So this collectible space has really blown up, and I think it continues on as this generation ages up, in the same way that you've got Marshall Fogel out here with his stuff at 80-something years old. I think there's going to be 80-year-old Dustins and other people that have got their, you know, their sealed action figures. And I think that stuff is going to be really fun to kind of track over time, because it's the first of these iconic IPs. When you look at Star Wars, is probably, outside of Mickey Mouse and Walt Disney, Star Wars is probably going to go down as the most iconic IP brand of all time. Just given where it started, where it's gone, the merchandising, all the stuff that's wrapped around it, the universe attached. It's just kind of this timeless thing, because there's a timeless story attached to it that over the ages, it's relatable. The other thing great about today and these times is that we are past the free money pandemic stimulus era. You know, that stuff has really kind of faded out. There's a lot of money that's kind of moved out and left the collectible space. So if you're someone that's getting in this year, or just kind of getting in now, or even in next year, I think, you know, there is been a nice little correction that's happened over the last year, depending on which type of collectible you're talking about, year, 18 months, couple of years, we've seen that correction happening. And for a lot of items, I think there will still be more correction to go. So if you're looking to get in, you know, to buy cool items to either hold on to or to flip or whatever, you know, it's just a great buying time, it feels like, compared to where we were over the last few years for a lot of people that were getting back in over the last few years. And I will say, I will kind of speak to that a little bit, because I think that whether you're a younger generation or you're an older generation, you might be wondering, like, why are all these 40-year-olds so, you know, they're in here flipping cards and they're all into doing the, you know, all the flipping and this and that and buying and selling of collectibles. You also have to understand that when we were 10, I was that 10-year-old kid that, you was opening packs in the card shop. And when I got a good card, the dealer said, hey, I'll give you 3 more packs if I can have that Barry Bonds rookie card. I could have that Ken Griffey Jr. card or that Shaq card. And that was basically the option outside of trading with your friends. It was trading cards back to the dealer, maybe for cash, but probably just for other cards or for more packs, because there was always more packs for the dealer to give down, to pass down. Now it's a whole market. It's a whole wide open free market where there's a billion different places to sell online, at shows, in person. I mean, you've got all these different options that we simply did not have when we were first collecting cards during that first boom back in, 87 to 94 or whatever. So you can't fault people, I don't think, for that, in that age range that are now like, oh my gosh, cool. I have the ability to liquidate out of cards where maybe I bought into something and then I'm like, I want to move into a different thing. You couldn't do that 30 years ago. You just could not do it, going back 30, 35 years. So, I think we all have to give each other some grace, as they say, and just remember how and why we got back in. And a lot of it, I know for a lot of people, it goes back to the simple times. It was the easy times, whether it was, the 80s or the 90s. You might be a little bit older than me, might be a little bit younger than me, but we all have that notion of, man, those were just the good old times, pre-responsibilities. A lot of us now have families and so forth. We're taking care of loved ones. We have friends that need help and so forth. And now, we're here, we're back in, and this is a release for us. So guys, enjoy your day, enjoy your time, stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.